Get out. Claire Whitmore's voice cut through the presidential suite with enough force to stop Ethan Cole before his second foot crossed the doorway.
Security,
I am
come out
sorry.
immediately.
Security. Ethan turned away immediately, lowering his eyes toward the carpet as he stepped backward into the hallway. He had seen enough to understand that Claire had been preparing for the charity event downstairs, and that his arrival had caught her completely off guard. He did not look again. He did not explain. He simply pulled the door nearly closed and waited beside his red toolbox. 38 floors above downtown Chicago, the Whitmore Grand was usually a world of polished marble, quiet elevators, expensive perfume, and employees trained never to disturb a guest. That morning, one unlocked door had shattered all of it. Ethan looked at the emergency work order still glowing on his phone. Electrical fault. Suite 3801. Immediate response required. He had knocked twice. No answer. His master key had flashed green. Every step he had taken followed hotel procedure, yet he already knew procedure would matter less than appearances. Footsteps approached quickly. Two security officers rounded the corner, followed by Richard Hale, the hotel's chief operating officer. Claire appeared at the doorway moments later, now fully prepared for the morning event, her expression controlled but furious. What happened? Richard demanded. He entered my suite without permission, Claire said. Richard looked at Ethan's maintenance uniform and then at the toolbox beside his boots. His judgment arrived before his questions. Give me your master key. Ethan calmly removed the electronic card from his belt. I received a priority electrical alert from this room at 8:42. Nobody called maintenance. The building system did. Richard gave a short, humorless laugh. That is convenient. Ethan's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. Check the work order. Richard stepped closer. You understand whose suite this is? I understand there was an emergency alert. You walked into the chief executive officer's private room after knocking twice and receiving authorized access. Claire watched Ethan carefully. He was not defensive. He was not trying to embarrass her. He was not even asking her to believe him. That quietness unsettled her. Most people around Claire rushed to explain themselves the moment her expression changed. Ethan simply stood there as if truth did not need permission to exist. One security officer examined Ethan's phone. Mr. Hale, the order is legitimate. Richard's expression shifted for half a second. Security office. Now. Ethan picked up his toolbox. He thought of Sophie waiting for him after school, the mortgage payment due Friday, and the groceries he still needed to buy. Losing this job would hurt. But dignity, he had learned, was easiest to lose when fear convinced you to surrender it. The elevator doors opened. Ethan stepped inside, then turned toward Richard. Check who sent the work order before you blame the man who answered it. The doors closed between them. Claire remained silent. Then she looked back at her suite door and noticed the small privacy indicator glowing beside the lock. Her anger faded. She had activated that lock herself less than 10 minutes earlier. Yet somehow, Ethan's key had still opened the door. The security office beneath the Whitmore Grand felt nothing like the luxury hotel above it. There were no chandeliers, no marble floors, and no carefully arranged flowers. Only gray walls, fluorescent lights, humming computer equipment, and an old clock ticking above a row of filing cabinets. Ethan sat across from Richard Hale with his red toolbox beside his chair and his hands resting calmly on the table. One security officer stood near the door while another reviewed the electronic work order. You entered the chief executive officer's private suite, Richard said. I responded to an emergency maintenance alert. You should have waited. I knocked twice. She did not answer. That is why emergency access exists. Richard leaned forward. Do you understand how serious this situation is? Ethan met his eyes. Yes. Then you understand why you may not have a job by the end of this meeting. For a moment, Ethan said nothing. Sophie needed new shoes before winter. The mortgage payment was due Friday. His truck had started making a noise he could not afford to investigate. He needed every paycheck this hotel gave him. But need and fear were not the same thing, and Ethan had spent years teaching his daughter that character mattered most when keeping it became expensive. The security officer turned from the computer. Mr. Hale, the work order is legitimate. Priority electrical fault. Suite 3801. Issued at 8:42 this morning. Richard's eyes narrowed. And the door. The emergency system authorized Mr. Cole's master key. Silence filled the small room. Ethan did not smile. He did not celebrate being right. Truth did not become more valuable because someone else had finally noticed it. Richard folded his arms. You are suspended pending an internal review. Ethan reached for the employee identification badge clipped to his shirt. For responding to the alert? For exercising poor judgment. Ethan placed the badge carefully on the table. I worked here 4 years. No disciplinary actions. No guest complaints. Richard pushed the badge toward himself. Everyone is replaceable. Ethan stood. His voice remained quiet. I can lose a paycheck. I will not lose my dignity. By 3:20 that afternoon, Ethan was parked outside Lincoln Elementary in his 12-year-old Ford pickup. Sophie climbed into the passenger seat carrying her purple backpack and immediately studied his face. Why are you picking me up today? I finished early. That sounds suspicious. Ethan smiled despite himself. You are 9. Everything sounds suspicious to you. Sophie buckled her seatbelt. Did something bad happen? Ethan looked through the windshield at parents walking beneath the pale September sunlight. Someone thought I did something wrong. Did you? No. Sophie considered that. Then tell them. Ethan started the truck. Sometimes the truth takes longer than we want. Across the city, Claire stood inside her suite while Daniel Brooks, the hotel security manager, examined the electronic lock records. You activated the privacy setting at 8:39, Daniel said. I know. At 8:41 and 23 seconds, it was overridden remotely. Claire stared at him. By Ethan? Daniel shook his head. No. His key was not authorized until after the override. The room suddenly felt colder. Then who did it? Daniel looked back at the screen. I do not know yet. Claire's phone was already in her hand. Ethan answered on the third ring. Mr. Cole, she said, quieter than before. I checked the door records. Ethan waited. Claire looked at the glowing timeline. Someone overrode my privacy lock 37 seconds before your emergency work order was issued. Someone overrode it? Ethan asked, keeping his voice low as Sophie watched him from the passenger seat. Yes, Claire said. And I owe you an apology. You were surprised. That does not excuse what happened afterward. Ethan looked through the windshield at families leaving the school parking lot beneath the pale September sun. No, it does not. Claire fell silent. Most employees would have rushed to forgive her, especially after learning their suspension might disappear with a single decision from her office. Ethan did not flatter power, and strangely, that made Claire trust his answer more. Did you tell anyone what happened inside my suite? She asked. No. Not even your coworkers? No. Why? Ethan glanced at Sophie, who was pretending to organize pencils inside her backpack while listening to every word. Because your privacy belongs to you. I was sent there to fix an electrical problem. What happened afterward was not mine to turn into gossip. Claire stood beside the suite window overlooking Chicago, suddenly unable to answer. She had spent years around executives who traded secrets like favors, investors who measured weakness in seconds, and acquaintances who treated proximity to her name as social currency. Yet the maintenance technician she had accused had been handed an embarrassing story about the chief executive officer of a major hotel company and chosen silence. Your suspension is under review, Claire said. That is Richard Hale's decision. It is my company. Then maybe it should be yours. Ethan's words were respectful, but they carried no fear. Good afternoon, Claire. He ended the call. She remained by the window with the phone in her hand, surprised that hearing her first name from him felt more honest than hearing her title from 100 other people. 20 minutes later, Claire sat inside her office with Daniel Brooks and Ethan's personnel file open across her desk. For years employed. 0 disciplinary actions. 0 guest complaints. Dozens of emergency maintenance responses. 1 dependent, Sophie Cole. Claire turned another page. He was offered assistant facilities manager 2 years ago. Daniel nodded. He declined it. Why? Daniel pointed toward a note attached to the promotion record. The new position required frequent travel between company properties throughout the Midwest. Ethan's written explanation was only 6 words. My daughter needs her father home. Claire read the sentence twice. Another note explained that Ethan's wife, Emily, had died 3 years earlier, leaving him as Sophie's only parent. He had not rejected ambition. He had simply decided what success meant to him. Claire leaned back slowly. Richard called him replaceable. Daniel said nothing. How many employees understand the original building control system? She asked. Maybe 3. Ethan understands it best. Claire closed the file. The man everyone had reduced to a maintenance uniform had quietly chosen fatherhood over a promotion, responsibility over status, and her dignity over an easy story. For the first time, embarrassment was no longer what Claire remembered about that morning. She remembered Ethan turning away without hesitation. She remembered him refusing to defend himself by humiliating her. She remembered his calm voice saying to check the work order. Daniel's computer suddenly chimed. He looked toward the screen, and the color drained from his face. Claire, what is it? The administrator record connected to your door override was here 5 minutes ago. Claire stood. Daniel stared at the changing security log. Someone just tried to delete it. Someone is deleting evidence? Claire asked. Daniel Brooks kept his eyes on the security terminal. Trying to. The system keeps an audit trace, but whoever did this has administrator level access. Can you recover it? Possibly, but Ethan knows the older building control network better than I do. Claire looked at Ethan's closed personnel file on her desk. Less than 24 hours earlier, she had wanted him removed from her suite. Now the truth was asking her to bring him back. At 7:15 the next morning, Ethan stood in his small kitchen pouring pancake batter into a skillet while Sophie sat at the table with a spelling worksheet and a glass of orange juice. The apartment smelled of coffee and maple syrup. Outside, Chicago traffic moved beneath a pale September sky. That pancake looks like Texas, Sophie said. Ethan studied it. That is clearly Illinois. Illinois does not have a giant nose. Breakfast is art, Sophie. Show some respect. She laughed just as his phone rang. Claire's name appeared on the screen. Ethan answered. Good morning. Mr. Cole, I need your help. I am still suspended. Not anymore. Ethan turned off the stove. Richard approved that. Richard does not know yet. Claire paused. Someone tried to erase the administrator record connected to my door. Daniel believes the older system may have retained information the main server lost. Ethan looked toward Sophie. I have to take my daughter to school. Take her. Come afterward, if you are willing. The word willing mattered. It was not an order. At 9:12, Ethan entered the Whitmore Grand wearing his Navy maintenance shirt and carrying the same red toolbox. Employees glanced toward him as he crossed the service lobby. A few whispered. Ethan kept walking. Respect was not something a hallway could give him, and gossip was not something it could take away. Claire met him beside Daniel in the security office. Thank you for coming. Ethan nodded toward the computer. Show me what disappeared. For nearly an hour, Ethan compared timestamps, maintenance routing records, and access commands. Then his phone vibrated. Lincoln Elementary. He answered immediately. A water main break had forced the school to dismiss students early. Ethan looked at Claire. I need to pick up Sophie. Claire nodded without hesitation. Go. This could take hours. Then bring her. Back here if you need to. She can stay in the employee lounge while we finish. 40 minutes later, Ethan returned with Sophie beside him, her purple backpack hanging from one shoulder. Daniel arranged a quiet corner in the nearby employee lounge where Ethan could see her through the glass partition while she worked on homework. Claire stepped into the room carrying a bottle of water and a granola bar. Sophie looked up. Are you Claire? Ethan stopped. Sophie. What? You said Claire called. Claire smiled faintly. Yes, I am Claire. Sophie studied her expensive cream suit, then her tired face. Are you the lady from Dad's bad day? Ethan closed his eyes for a second. Claire surprised him by laughing softly. I suppose I am. Sophie tilted her head. Why do you look sad if you own this whole hotel? The question landed harder than any accusation Claire had heard in a boardroom. She glanced through the glass toward the skyline, then back at the child. Sometimes having a lot does not mean you have everything. Sophie considered this seriously, opened her backpack, and offered Claire a second granola bar. Dad says people think better after they eat. Claire accepted it with both hands. Your dad sounds smart. He is. He just does not make much money. Sophie. What? You said honesty matters. Claire laughed again, but Ethan noticed something beneath it, something almost forgotten. Warmth. A few minutes later, Daniel called from the security office. Ethan hurried back to the terminal, Claire following him. A recovered routing record had appeared on the screen. Ethan leaned closer. His expression changed. What is it? Claire asked. Ethan pointed to the timestamp. My name was manually moved to the top of the emergency response queue 12 minutes before your electrical alert was issued. Claire went still. Someone had not merely opened her door. Someone had chosen Ethan to walk through it. By late afternoon, rain had begun tracing silver lines down the windows of the Whitmore Grand, turning the Chicago skyline beyond them into a blur of gray glass and distant lights. Sophie remained in the employee lounge with her homework, a coloring book Daniel had found in a supply cabinet, and strict instructions from Ethan not to wander. Claire arranged for a trusted guest services supervisor to remain nearby, then followed Ethan and Daniel toward the service corridor behind the 38th floor. If someone assigned me before the alert existed, the newer server may not tell us why, Ethan said. But the original building control system might. How old is original? Claire asked. Old enough that everyone complains about it until they need something the new system forgot. Daniel almost smiled. They reached a narrow mechanical room filled with electrical cabinets, ventilation controls, and the low hum of equipment hidden from the guests staying only a few yards away. Ethan opened a metal panel and connected a maintenance terminal. Claire watched him work. Upstairs, she could command a room filled with executives. Down here, among wires, switches, and aging control boards, Ethan moved with an assurance she rarely saw in people trying to impress her. You really know this building, she said. Buildings make sense. People do not. People can tell you what they think you want to hear. Claire folded her arms. That sounds personal. Ethan glanced at her. You are the chief executive officer. You probably understand it better than I do. The lights suddenly flickered, then went dark. A second later, amber emergency lamps illuminated the corridor. Claire looked toward the ceiling. Should I be concerned? Ethan listened to the ventilation fans slowing behind the wall. Backup power should transfer in a few seconds. Should? It is a very useful word in maintenance. The power returned with a low mechanical hum. Daniel stepped into the hallway to contact engineering, leaving Ethan and Claire beside the terminal. For the first time, there were no assistants, security officers, or executives between them. Only the sound of rain and the soft green glow of an old screen. Can I ask you something? Claire said. You already are. Why did you refuse that promotion? Ethan's hand stopped over the keyboard. You read my file. I did. He was quiet for several seconds. My wife, Emily, died 3 years ago. Sophie was 6. The promotion meant traveling between company properties almost every week. Claire's expression softened. So you gave up your career? Ethan looked at her. No, I chose one. The answer stayed between them. Claire had spent years measuring achievement through revenue, expansion, market share, and expectations inherited from her father. Ethan measured success by whether his daughter found him at the breakfast table. Everyone changes when they know who I am, Claire said quietly. Employees become careful. Investors become friendly. Strangers suddenly need something. Ethan returned his attention to the terminal. Then stop introducing yourself with your title. Claire stared at him. That is easy for you to say. Maybe. But Sophie met Claire today. She did not meet a chief executive officer. Claire smiled despite herself. She also informed me that you do not make much money. I will address that betrayal later. Claire laughed, and the sound surprised both of them. Then Ethan's expression changed. A hidden routing history had appeared on the terminal. He leaned closer and opened the archive command sequence. Claire. She stepped beside him. What did you find? Ethan pointed at 3 timestamps. His employee identification had been manually prioritized. Her privacy setting had been overridden minutes later. Then the electrical response had been released directly to him. Claire's smile disappeared. Where did those commands originate? Ethan opened the authorization field. The screen displayed one access category. Executive Administration. Claire went still. Only a handful of senior officers had authority at that level, and one of them had demanded Ethan's key before anyone checked the first work order. Claire stared at the words Executive Administration until the letters seemed to carry more weight than they should have. How many people can issue commands at that level? Ethan asked. Very few. Richard. Claire hesitated. Yes. Ethan closed the access window. Then do not confront anyone yet. This is my company. Exactly. If someone inside it manipulated the system once, give them time to believe nobody noticed. Claire looked at him, surprised by how calmly he said it. You are remarkably patient for a man who may have been deliberately set up. Ethan picked up his flashlight. Anger does not make evidence stronger. By the time Claire returned Sophie and Ethan home that evening, Chicago was shining beneath wet streets and reflected traffic lights. She said little during the ride back to the hotel. Ethan's words followed her into the night. The next morning, they became more important. At 7:43, Claire received an emergency message from her assistant. Richard Hale had scheduled a special board meeting for 9 o'clock. The subject was executive conduct and reputational exposure. Attached was a security image showing Ethan leaving Claire's suite. The photograph had been cropped tightly enough to remove the security officers approaching from the elevator and stripped of the timestamp that would have shown how little time had passed. Beneath it was a recommendation from Richard stating that Ethan should be terminated immediately and offered a confidentiality agreement. Claire read the final paragraph twice. It warned that any attempt by her to personally defend Ethan could create the appearance of an inappropriate relationship and damage investor confidence. At 9 o'clock, Ethan sat at the far end of the executive conference table wearing a clean navy work shirt. Around him were attorneys, board members, and senior officers dressed in expensive suits. Richard stood beside the presentation screen. "This is not personal," he said. "It is about protecting the company." The cropped photograph appeared behind him. Mr. Cole entered Miss Whitmore's private suite during a sensitive moment. Whatever his explanation, the appearance creates reputational risk. A board member looked toward Claire. Why was his suspension reversed? Because the emergency work order was legitimate, Claire said. Richard immediately answered. That does not explain why he entered without sufficient confirmation. Ethan remained silent. Richard continued. My recommendation is termination, a generous severance payment, and a confidentiality agreement. Miss Whitmore should also issue a statement confirming there is no personal relationship between them. Another board member leaned forward. Claire, defending him publicly could make this worse. Claire looked toward Ethan. She could see exactly what Richard had built. If she abandoned Ethan, an innocent man carried the shame. If she defended him, Richard turned compassion into scandal. Ethan, Claire said quietly. He met her eyes. Do not save my job because you feel guilty. Richard frowned. Mr. Cole, you are not here to advise the chief executive officer. Ethan ignored him. Claire, if I deserve to lose my job, let me lose it. If I do not, then do not pay me to disappear. The room became still. Do not save my job, he said. Tell the truth. Claire slowly closed the folder in front of her. Daniel, show them the complete hallway recording. Daniel Brooks turned toward the conference room computer. He entered the archive credentials, waited, then entered them again. His face changed. Claire. What? Daniel looked up from the screen. The original hallway video was accessed 23 minutes ago. Richard said nothing. Daniel swallowed. It has been deleted. Deleted? Claire repeated. Daniel nodded slowly. From the primary server. The request came through an executive-level account, but the identification trail was scrubbed. Richard leaned back in his chair. Then there is no complete video. We should stop wasting everyone's time. Ethan looked at him. The answer had come too quickly. Claire noticed it too. Nobody leaves, she said. Richard's expression hardened. Claire, this is becoming unreasonable. Someone manipulated my privacy lock, deliberately assigned Ethan to my suite, attempted to erase the access record, and now deleted security footage minutes before this meeting. I think unreasonable left the room yesterday. Silence settled across the table. Ethan turned toward Daniel. The primary server is not the only place that could have retained the recording. Daniel frowned. The backup archive mirrors the primary system. I'm not talking about the main backup. Ethan remembered the old equipment behind the 38th floor, the same aging network they had used the previous afternoon. Years earlier, after repeated communication failures between the modern security network and the original building systems, engineering had left a local emergency recorder connected to the life safety controller. It was not designed as a permanent surveillance archive. It simply buffered nearby camera feeds during system interruptions so security could review what happened around an emergency event. Most employees had forgotten it existed. Ethan had not. There may be a local emergency cache on 38, he said. Richard immediately stood. This board meeting is not going to turn into a scavenger hunt. Ethan looked at him calmly. If there is nothing on it, you lose 20 minutes. Claire rose from her chair. Daniel, go with him. 23 minutes later, Ethan opened the old control cabinet while Daniel connected a maintenance terminal. Dust lined the metal housing, and a cooling fan rattled softly behind the panel. Please tell me you were right, Daniel said. Ethan entered the archive menu. I would rather let the machine tell us. Files began appearing. Sensor activity. Door commands. Emergency events. Ethan selected the morning of the incident. His expression changed. Look at the electrical sensor. Daniel leaned closer. Heat behind the suite wall had begun rising 11 minutes before Ethan received his work order. The electrical alert had been real. More importantly, an early warning had been sent to executive administration at 8:31. Someone acknowledged it, but maintenance was not dispatched. They knew, Daniel whispered. Ethan opened the next record. At 8:39, Claire activated her privacy lock. At 8:41, an executive authorization overrode it. Seconds later, Ethan was manually moved to priority response. Then his emergency work order was released. That was not coincidence, Daniel said. Ethan opened the authorization history. The command had originated from a credential group controlled by Richard Hale's office, with a specific session assigned to Richard's executive account. Ethan did not celebrate. He only stared at the sequence. Quiet truth had finally begun speaking for itself. Daniel pointed toward another folder. Camera buffer. Ethan opened it. Several short video files appeared, automatically preserved when the electrical event triggered the local life safety recorder. Daniel exhaled. The hallway. Ethan selected the first file. There he was, walking from the elevator with his red toolbox. The timestamp was intact. He approached Claire's door, knocked once, waited, then knocked again. Ethan stopped the playback. Copy everything before we touch another file. Daniel inserted an external drive. Minutes later, they returned to the conference room. Richard looked toward them, and for the first time that morning, his confidence seemed uncertain. Claire stood beside the table. Did you find anything? Daniel placed the drive beside the computer. The electrical warning was real. It was acknowledged before Ethan was dispatched, and the access sequence was manipulated through Richard's executive session. Every face turned toward Richard. He opened his mouth, but Ethan spoke quietly. There is more. Claire looked at him. Ethan nodded toward the presentation screen. The original hallway recording was deleted from the main server, but the building remembered what happened. Play the whole video, Claire said. Richard looked toward her. Claire, this proves nothing about intent. Then the truth should not frighten anyone. Daniel connected the recovered emergency archive to the conference room system. The large screen flickered, and the hallway outside Suite 3801 appeared beneath a clear timestamp. 8:42 in the morning. Nobody spoke. Ethan emerged from the elevator carrying his red toolbox. He checked the work order on his phone, walked to Claire's door, and knocked. Once. He waited. Then he knocked again. Still no answer. He checked the emergency authorization, placed his key against the reader, and the lock flashed green. The door opened. Ethan stepped inside. Less than 2 seconds later, he turned away and immediately backed into the hallway. His eyes dropped toward the carpet. He placed his toolbox beside the wall and waited. The recording continued until Claire appeared at the doorway and security approached from the elevator. Daniel froze the image. The room became completely silent. Not the uncertain silence of people waiting for an explanation. This was the silence that came when there was nothing left to misunderstand. One board member slowly removed his glasses. Another closed the folder containing Richard's recommendation. Claire looked at Ethan. For 2 days, people had discussed what he might have seen, what he might have said, and what his presence could cost the company. The video answered a different question. It showed what kind of man he had chosen to be when nobody was watching. Richard stood. A short video does not establish what happened before he entered. Daniel changed the display. The system records do. The electrical sensor behind the suite wall showed rising heat 11 minutes before Ethan was dispatched. The first warning had reached executive administration at 8:31. The response was acknowledged but delayed. Claire's privacy lock was activated at 8:39. An executive session associated with Richard's office overrode it at 8:41. Ethan was then manually moved to the top of the emergency queue, and his work order was released. Richard's face tightened. That account is used by my office. Other people have access. Claire did not raise her voice. Then an independent investigation will determine who used it. You are going to damage this company over a maintenance employee? Ethan looked down for a moment, but Claire did not. No, Richard. Someone damaged this company when they decided an employee's dignity was expendable. The chairman turned toward Daniel. Preserve every record. Restrict all administrative credentials connected to Mr. Hale's office until outside counsel completes its review. Richard gathered his papers. You will regret turning this into a spectacle. Claire looked at the frozen image of Ethan standing outside her door with his eyes lowered. The spectacle began when someone tried to turn an innocent man into one. Richard left without another word. The door closed behind him. Claire remained standing. She faced Ethan in front of the same people who had been prepared to dismiss him minutes earlier. Mr. Cole, I accused you before I understood what happened. Then this company tried to solve the problem by paying you to disappear. You deserved better. Ethan nodded once. Thank you. Claire turned toward the board. Everyone in this room worried about what he saw when that door opened. Her voice softened. Nobody asked what kind of man chose not to look. No one moved. Ethan's eyes lowered, not from shame, but from the quiet weight of finally being seen correctly. Daniel suddenly looked back at his computer. Claire, there is something else. She turned. What? Daniel opened a document recovered from the same deleted executive session. At the top was a proposal prepared for the board. Claire read the first lines and went still. The incident had never been designed only to destroy Ethan's reputation. It had been designed to make the board remove Claire from her own company. The recovered proposal was only 4 pages long, but Claire understood its purpose before she reached the second page. Richard had prepared a recommendation declaring her leadership compromised by poor judgment, personal involvement with an employee, and failure to protect the Whitmore Grand from reputational risk. If the board accepted it, an interim chief executive officer would take control before Friday's expansion vote. Richard had not needed to prove Claire was guilty of anything. He only needed enough doubt to make powerful people afraid of keeping her in charge. Claire lowered the document. He wanted me to defend Ethan. Daniel nodded. Or abandon him. Either choice helped the argument. Ethan stood quietly beside the conference table. Then I was never the target. Claire looked at him. You were a target. You just were not the final one. The chairman postponed Friday's expansion vote and authorized an independent investigation into the executive access records, deleted footage, and Richard's office. Richard was placed on administrative leave while outside counsel reviewed the evidence. Claire did not celebrate. Neither did Ethan. Justice was not revenge. It was simply the moment truth no longer needed permission to remain in the room. 3 weeks later, October sunlight filled Claire's office when Ethan arrived after his morning maintenance rounds. She pushed a folder across the desk. Director of Building Systems. Ethan opened it. The salary was nearly twice his current pay, the schedule was stable, and the position required no regular travel between company properties. He looked at her. This feels suspiciously convenient. Claire smiled. You understand this building better than anyone we interviewed. You found evidence our security team missed. You also have 4 years of excellent performance reviews. And I accidentally became part of an executive investigation. That qualification was not listed. Ethan studied the offer again. I need to leave by 5 most days. Sophie has homework, soccer practice, and an impressive ability to forget school projects until the night before they are due. Then leave by 5. I do not want charity. Claire's expression became serious. Good. Because I am not offering it. Respect means giving people what they earned, not what makes us feel generous. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, then signed his name. Over the following weeks, something changed between them, but neither rushed to name it. Claire began visiting the engineering floor without an assistant. Ethan stopped becoming formal whenever she entered a room. Sophie occasionally waited in his office after school and developed the habit of leaving granola bars on Claire's desk because, according to her, rich people were apparently terrible at remembering lunch. Claire laughed more. Ethan noticed. Grace rarely arrived with an announcement. Sometimes it entered quietly, sat down beside 2 tired people, and waited until they were ready to recognize it. By November, Chicago evenings came early and cold. One Friday, Ethan was making spaghetti when the doorbell rang. Sophie reached the door first. Claire stood outside wearing jeans, a cream sweater, and a simple gray coat. No assistant. No driver. No business suit. She held a paper bakery bag in both hands. Sophie looked behind her. Did you lose your hotel? Claire laughed. Not today. Ethan appeared from the kitchen, drying his hands on a towel. Everything all right. Claire lifted the bag. I brought apple pie. Sophie stepped aside immediately. That is a strong argument for letting you in. Claire smiled, then hesitated. Sophie, can I ask you something? Sure. Do I have to be his boss tonight? Sophie looked at Ethan, then back at Claire. Are you here as his boss? Claire's eyes met Ethan's. No, not tonight. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Ethan opened the door wider. Come in, Claire. She stepped across the threshold. Months earlier, one door had opened by mistake and nearly cost Ethan his dignity. This door opened by choice. There were no titles waiting on the other side, no scandal, no boardroom, and no debt to repay. Only dinner, a little girl trying not to smile too obviously, and two people learning that second chances rarely arrive with noise. Sometimes they simply knock, wait patiently, and hope someone has the grace to open the door.